Here on Weston Park is the Great Oak, known affectionately as Old Major. It dates from the period when the park formed part of the Leicester Forest, and sadly today it is believed to be the last remaining tree. So where was Leicester Forest? Let's go back 6,000 years and start our journey. Now it's safe to assume that 4,000 years before Christ, the entire area of Leicester Forest was covered in dense oak trees. It spread all the way up between the Great Heath Brook and the River Soar. This period was called the Neolithic Age, which is the last stage of the Stone Age. The Neolithic people of the time, using stone axes, cleared an awful lot of forest up and down England. We can see on the map, however, they would have left most of Leicester Forest alone, because Leicester soil was heavy clay and they couldn't farm it.
This ground is just too hard to dig through.
Why don't we use that plough over there?
We can't do that because it's not been invented for another 5,000 years.
Oh, okay, best be off then.
Now that was the Stone Age, and they would have continued on into the Bronze Age, which is about 2,000 years BC. They would have been using bronze axes to cut away a few more of the trees, and a little bit more of Leicester Forest would have disappeared.
The Bronze Age lasted just over 1,000 years until the arrival of a new technology, iron making. I am an Iron Age Briton, and my tribe, the Coritanis, lived across the East Midlands. We had a settlement at a crossing on the River Soar, which would later become Leicester. Our axes, tools and weapons were stronger, and we cleared more of the Leicester Forest. Our iron ploughs were also more effective, and we could feed more people. To protect our harvested crops and ourselves, many of us lived in hill forts. My settlement was in Desford.
Then came the Romans, 43 years after Christ. They invade and come up from the south, and to mark their territory they have conquered, they quickly developed the Fosse Way. Actually, this was an ancient road, the enormous road which cuts right across our country to this day. So we know that the Romans would have cleared any remaining forest that was either side of Fosse Way. We also know that the Romans were in Desford, as we have found old Roman kilns. They stay until the Roman Empire starts to collapse, and so around 450 AD the Saxons arrive. They are particularly interested in settling, like the other people, along the waterways, and so the clearance would have taken place all along the heath and along the River Soar.
Now the Saxons, we know, settled in Desford, so they would have taken over from the Romans very happily. We know they settled in Thurleston, so they would have cleared these areas for building houses and other areas around it for farming. The Saxons remained unmolested for about 300 to 400 years until it's now late 8th century, about 795 AD, and in come the Viking invaders from the east, and they are ruthless individuals. Places with BY at the end, such as Ratby, Gruby, Odeby, were Viking settlements, also Enderby and Braunston. So we know they would have been clearing these areas for their settlements as well, so more of Leicester Forest disappears.
Did you know that Viking swords were prized possessions, and sometimes given names?
I think I might call mine Fluffy.
But despite the Vikings being formidable opponents, the Saxons did manage to stop them taking over the whole of England.
So by the time we get to the key date, 1066, it's a very rich and well-run Saxon country. Leicester Forest itself is owned by the people, who had access to use the wood how they wished. The Saxons mainly used the forest for wood, to keep warm, to cook, and the oak for building. A crucial part of the medieval diet were rabbits from the forest. They also let their cattle and pigs under there, so they could eat the acorns underneath the oak trees. This era was prosperous Saxon England. It was very rich pickings, and made England such an attractive prize. And then, I'm a northern king in northern France, and I think it's time to invade. The Normans invaded England and moved up quickly from London. They had built Leicester Castle, albeit a wooden one, by 1068, so only 2 years from winning the Battle of Hastings. Elshilton Castle followed 20 years later. The Normans had a great love of deer hunting. Very soon after they came into power, Leicester Forest no longer belonged to the people.
It's not fair. The Normans have taken the forest and used it as their own private hunting ground. They use horses to chase after the deer and fire at them with bows and arrows.
Oh, this hunting's such fun. You should try it sometime. Oh, you can't. You're a Saxon.
To prevent the deer from escaping, they built huge perimeters all the way around the forest. That had a fundamental impact on the Saxons because it was very difficult to survive without your own forest. The Saxons then said,
This is no good. We can't survive if you don't let us into the forest anymore.
And that was when the Normans introduced the forest laws, which had a massive impact on everyone's life in England.
You can now use the forest, but it's going to cost you. We're going to put gates across all the major highways. If you want to come in, then you're going to have to pay us.
Some Saxons just simply said,
I can't do it anymore. I can't afford it. We're poor enough as it is.
They decided to sneak into areas where hopefully the Normans were not around and steal the items they used to be able to get for free.
I have a plan. Now listen. We're going to have a go at poaching. Yeah. We're going to go into the Normans' land in the forest and we're going to take what we need without those pesky Normans ever finding out. Are you in? Great.
The Normans were wise to this, so they had a whole system set up to try and catch them. So throughout the forest there were lodges where the foresters lived, whose primary job was to catch Saxon poachers. One lodge still remains today in Leicester Forest East, Boyer's Lodge. When you look at the whole forest, the foresters are basically set out in a variety of lodges around the place to try and catch these poachers. If they managed to do so, they would take these poachers to the courthouse, Heatherley Lodge, deliberately placed on the crossroads of the forest. If you got caught trespassing, you would be fined, and if they got caught poaching, they would be imprisoned and sent to the prison near Leicester Castle. That was the way the very profitable system worked until Henry IV became King of England. He makes the forest a royal forest, but soon becomes uninterested in it and takes whatever profits he could get. Slowly, the forest just disintegrated and little is now left.
By the time it gets to 1628, Charles I needs money desperately. He signs the order to sell the whole remaining area of the forest in one to go to all the local farmers, particularly the sheep farmers, who cut it all down over a few hundred years. We are now back to the present day, and the only remaining tree left is Old Major. So, what's going to happen in the future for Leicester Forest?